How are we doing this morning?
Good.
Who's this belong to? Anybody know? I got to color by numbers up here. It's good to be with you together again today. And we're going to continue in our series, The Voices in My Head. Last week we talked about the demon-possessed man. And I mentioned that you don't have to be possessed, to be overwhelmed, and to have our heads full with things, with troubles. To be overwhelmed and possessed by plaguing thoughts that we deal with in our everyday life. This week I want to talk about the identity crisis. You ever get those things that cause you to question who you are and what you're doing and where you're heading in your life? Well, life can be like a roller coaster, right? Where things go smoothly, you know? Made me think of going to Adventureland. Who's ever been to Adventureland in Farmingdale, right? I remember going there with Kathy and the kids and my mother-in-law. And they had this little coaster. And she went solo on this. And it was hysterical to watch her. It was a very calm coaster, but it had these sharp right-angle turns. And you watch her go, you know? But it was slightly thrilling, you know? And quite often, our experiences in life can be like that. They're just mild, you know? We have our ups and downs, but they're not drastic. But then there are different times when we're in the coaster of life where things are really rough, right? I mean, they're frightening. We get thrown for a loop, and we just start to wonder, what is going on? And when we go through those experiences, they tend to leave us feeling a little lost, insecure, and questioning. What's going on? What's happening to me? And a lot of those throws, those loops that we're thrown for, pertain to change. And we're going to discuss that this morning. And change always brings stress. I don't care what kind of change we can experience, there's always a hint of stress. And when those changes take place and stress starts to kick in, it's like I thought about it this week. It's like the voices in our heads they form a band, a garage band, you know, and they start writing songs like "Who Are You?" and "I'm so lost," and "Now what?" Because it can go on for an extended amount of time where we are questioning what's happening to us, and it's very troubling. This morning I want to look at someone who I believe had a roller coaster of sorts in his life, where he thought he was one person, but then found out that his identity changed, and then his identity changed again. And the person I'm speaking about is Moses. Moses was a man who was born into troubling times. Many of us know the stories about the place that the Israelites were in Egypt, how the Pharaoh wanted to do away with these people. And so it was like kind of this silent genocide. Girls could be born to the Israelites, but men, well, any baby boy that was found, it was to be done away with. They didn't want any more men. And so there was this genocide going on, and many of the Israelite women had help from someone, and they would be able to bring children into the world. And Moses' mother gave birth to him, and then she put him in a basket. And she covered that basket, the undercarriage of that basket, with like a tar substance, right? And she put him into the Nile, into the reeds at the Nile. And who but found him was Pharaoh's daughter. And Pharaoh's daughter took him into the house and raised him, but not as an Israelite, although he was an Israelite. Everything about his DNA was an Israelite, but raised him as an Egyptian. And then we leap forward in Moses' life to his adulthood. And we find a man who has a dual identity, if I could say it that way. A man of two cultures. And I would say that he had two identities, in essence. IDE, an Egyptian identity, because he was raised in a home to dress and to look and to clothe himself and to act like an Egyptian. But then he had an IDH, Hebrew identity. He had a Hebrew identity. Because you can take the Israelite away from his family, but you can't remove the family out of the Israelite. You ever have those times where you see a child, maybe it's your own child, someone else, your children's children as grandparents, and you can identify your children through them, but then you can identify yourself through your children. You go, oh man, that's me. You know, it's kind of scary, you know. But you can't take it, you can't remove it. And so Moses is going to have this experience where he is going to start to be aware of certain things about who he is. The first verse I want to look at with you is in Exodus chapter 2, verse 11. Now, for the record, and Matt Ostrander knows this, I stay far away from the King James Version. I just think it's wordy, I think it's older, and I'm very mindful that when I want to share scriptures or truth with people, younger people, that I want to give them a different version than the these and the thous, right? But I was very much drawn to this in the King James Version because of the way it reads, okay? And it came to pass in those days, when Moses was grown, that he went out unto his brethren. Now I want to stop there for a moment. When you look at what the theologians say and break down this verse, you're reading up to that point and you start to say, well, his brethren. Now, was it his Egyptian brethren that he worked alongside of, that he grew up with? Or someone else? Well, we come to find out it's someone else. And looked at their burdens. And immediately you got to get a sense that he has an awareness of who he was. That something made him aware that he really wasn't an Egyptian, but that in fact he was an Israelite. And so in that he sees their burdens and he spies an Egyptian smiting a Hebrew, one of his brethren. There's an identification there. Okay, I'm not Egyptian. I'm an Israelite. So in that, Moses enters in and he engages and he murders the Egyptian. And he buries him in the sand because there was plenty of sand to go around. And many of you might remember that scene from the Ten Commandments, when Charlton Heston neatly tucks away the dead body under the sand, which is later to be found. And so he does this, and he carries on, and the next day he comes back and he finds two of the Hebrews fighting. Now listen to what he says. Why are you striking your companion? In other words, you guys are on the same team. You know, yesterday he's thinking I was here and I disrupted something, but it was someone from the foreign team striking me. Why are you doing this? And instead of getting acceptance, because what he was expecting was acceptance, because he now aligned himself with those who were being mistreated, he finds himself rejected. Who made you our ruler? Who made you our judge? You know? Like, in other words, what do you have to do with us? And so there was a fear that came over him. Confusion. And he took off. He became a flight risk, as we say today. And he took off and he heads out to the wilderness and he meets a priest, the priest of Midian. And he marries his daughter. And thus he begins another life. Egyptian, Israelite, now he's on his own. You can kind of see the coaster of his life taking place. He's taking identity hits. Who am I? You know? And what is my life to be about? And so, you know, you can hear this going on. You know, somebody was keeping track. He's a Hebrew. No, he's an Egyptian. No, he's a Hebrew. This is a man who starts out being born into a slave camp, into a slave home, and he's put out. Then he finds himself in the pampered palace. And now that's his life. And now he ends up on the dirty mountainside, tending sheep, because that's what he ended up doing. Who am I? What's happening? sense of confusion? I mean, I would be confused. I thought I was this. I thought I belonged here. Identified with that. I did something about it. Took steps to connect. And instead, I found myself rejected. Hear what's going on inside of me. We took a moment. Now, last week we talked about that madman who Jesus went out of his way to find so he could change his life. Well, I want to say to you, God has always been about coming to us, going out to those who are in need. We saw it last week with the madman. We read about it in the lost sheep. Did not the shepherd leave the 99 to go out to the one, for the one who really needed it the most, who was lost? Well, God does so also with Moses. He is going to go after him. He's going to find him. He knows where he is anyway. And he's going to take the time out, a moment with him. He's going to show up and he's going to get Moses' attention. Now, I don't know about you, but there are times when I need God to get my attention because my head is spinning. Life just isn't working out the way I thought. I was thinking one thing and it didn't turn out that way. And I need God to show up, to get my attention, to speak to me, to engage with me, and to kind of let me know that I belong to him. There isn't a person in this room today, I believe, that wouldn't want to know that they belong to someone, that they're connected in relationships, significant relationships, that you have a place that you belong. And so, God is going to do that. He's going to, in the midst of the change and the stress in Moses' life, he's going to engage with him. And he's going to get his attention. And he's going to dialogue with him. Listen to what he says, and he tells Moses in Exodus 3:6. And so he said, I am the God of your father. Now he's saying this because he's got his attention to a burning bush. Here Moses is on a mountainside doing his thing. He does it every day. He heads up, he's with the sheep, he's living with them, he's caring for them. And God shows up in a burning bush and he gets Moses' attention, and Moses is drawn to go there. And as he does, God engages him in conversation, and he says, I am the God of your father. The God of your father. The God of Abraham. The God of Isaac. And the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, but he was afraid to look at God. See what God's doing? God is now going to inform him of his true identity. This is who you are. This is the people that you belong to. That you're not alone. That you're just not forgotten out here. That you just haven't been displaced. That you belong to a people. And I am the God of those people. And by the way, since you're connected to these people, I am your God. I am your God. Think about the security blanket that he begins to sense that his life is not a mistake, that he hasn't been forgotten, that he is just not simply displaced and he laying in a bed of confusion about what he is supposed to be. He's now getting a sense of what he's supposed to be because of who he is. But, you know, Moses has been struggling for some time. And there's this glitch. And listen to what he says to God. He says in verse 12, but I will be, God says to him, I will be with you, and this is a sign, shall be a sign that I have sent you, that when you have been brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. In other words, this is who you are. I am going to send you to a people. I'm sorry, I missed the verse.
No, it wasn't me.
Apologies. God engages him and says, come with me in verses 10 and 11. Come, and I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people and the children of Israel out of Egypt. But here's the glitch that Moses is struggling with. But, Moses said to God, who am I? Who am I? he's not totally sold yet. He's not totally fixed on his true identity with God. And he asks God, but who am I? Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? Almost like you're talking to me. This is what you want me to do? And I think at that moment, he had a hard time seeing himself in that role. Have you ever been in that place in your life? Having a hard time of seeing yourself in a particular role. Maybe it was a job you took, and you thought you were fully qualified for it. But then you got into it, and you started realizing, I'm lacking a little experience in this area. I need some training over here. You didn't feel so secure about what you were doing, and you struggled with it. Maybe it's the first time you became a parent. You know? That's always an interesting change in life. Carries its share of stresses. Because you had a hard enough time being responsible for yourself, but now you're going to be responsible for someone else besides your wife, your children. You know? So there are these hiccups and these glitches that we can go through, that Moses, I believe, is going through. But this is what God says in verse 12. But I will be with you. I will be with you. And this shall be a sign for you, that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. And you see what God is doing. God is giving him an identity, and God is giving him a purpose and a plan for his life. An identity which comes with a purpose and a plan. See, I think that those three things go together. That we are identified as God's people, that he has a purpose for us, and he has a plan for us. And all of that rests in a relationship with him, which God now is establishing with him on that mountain. God is taking hold of him. After getting his attention, he's going to send him in a direction that at that moment he thought he'd never be going in. That he thought, whatever he was thinking, he wasn't thinking that he was going to head back to Egypt. He might have been thinking, well, this is where I am, stuck for the rest of my life. Out here, tending sheep. But not so. Further on, let's see what God has to say to him in verse 13. And then Moses said to God, if I come to the people of Israel, and I say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, say this to the people of Israel. I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel. The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations. Gives him identity, which carries with it a purpose and a plan. And I want to tell you, when God gets a hold of our lives, when we have gone through something and he gets a hold of our lives, it is not just for ourselves, but it is for others. And I know that maybe some of you are sitting here today saying, I'm having a hard enough time with myself. God has a purpose and a plan for me. I get that. But now it means going and helping someone else. Do you know what my life is like? Do you know what I'm going through? Do you know what I'm under, the weights I feel? The burdens, the discouragement. And God wants to use me to help somebody else? And the answer to that question is yes. See, because I believe part of the power of God in changing our lives and giving us an identity, a purpose, and a plan is to take us out of ourselves and set us on a course to help others. Because that's why we are here. That's why we gather in this place. That's why we reach for him. And why he reaches out into us. Because it's more than just about us. And I know that sometimes that's hard to get a hold of, in the sense that, Pastor Vin, you don't know the roller coaster in my life. you know? Trying to make ends meet, trying to raise a family, trying to balance out life between work and children and church, and it's just too overwhelming. And so we end up like those photos that we see where our life is being turned upside down, and we're literally holding on for dear life on that coaster because we don't want to fall. Because we feel like we're going to fall. And then the trash starts in the head, you know? The talking, the discouragement, the identity hits. So you thought you could do this, huh? You're having a hard time, aren't you? Maybe you're just not cut out for this. Maybe you're not cut out to be a husband. Maybe you're not cut out to be a wife. Maybe you're not cut out to have children. Maybe you're not cut out to do that job, to have your own business, or whatever it is. Maybe it's just not for you. And you begin to start to feel that changes are taking place and stress is starting to accumulate, and you start to question who you are, who am I, and what am I really doing here, you know? And the change brings stress, and the stress begins to mount. I want to tell you, the changes in life that bring stress are all around us. And some of those ways where we are shaken at our core and who we are is when death takes place. And we all have experienced that. And we are going to continue to experience that in the lives of people that we love and have grown in relationship with. Some get their identity shook when a child is lost. How many times do you hear when a couple loses a child, God forbid? Because it should never be. It should never be. When my daughter, at the age of 11, became so ill that she almost died, I sat down with Pastor Art, and I was shook to my core. He said, you know, this is just so unnatural, because children should never go before their parents. Never mind the grandparents. When people lose a child, a lot of times the husband and wife can't get on. They don't know how to get on. The loss is so deep and grievous that, you know, I think they begin to question, why are we together? We had a family, we had a child, and now we don't. And I believe their identity gets shook. Or how about when we lose a spouse? You know, a person that we believed that we were going to go through life with. I remember when Kathy and I got engaged and we're moving towards marriage. And I remember looking at her and saying, I want to grow old together with you. My sister-in-law, when she lost my brother, said that. I thought we were going to get to grow old together. You see? One day you're Mr. and Mrs., and the next day, the remaining spouse, the bottom of life has dropped out. What's my identity? I was Mr., and now I'm alone. I was Mrs., and now I'm alone. And it can happen, that identity crisis happens as well as when we lose a sibling, a grandparent, a close friend. People that we've connected to, people that we draw our identity from, because you and I do that, whether we admit it or realize it or not. But by being together like this in a family, we draw our identity from being here. I was tempted to send out the photos. Sue Ceruto sent me a photo of the women's time yesterday, and I was going to post it and say, look at these, and say something like, you know, they're wanted in 5 states. This is what happens when women get together and get in trouble, you know? But I opted not to. Anyway, but the bottom line was, I looked at that photo and I could see connections. Some just being formed, some that have been formed for years. And whether we realize that, we gain identity from being together like that. There's power in that. And when it gets disrupted, we get shook. We get shook. Or how about when somebody goes through a divorce? Again, like the person who loses a spouse. 1 minute you're Mr. and Mrs., and the next minute you find yourself rejected and kicked to the curb. An outcast in many respects, because you had this identity with this person, and you not only identified to the family that you were raised in, but now, for some years, you have identified with your spouse's family. And now, your life has been turned upside down. And you find yourself an outcast, because what does the other spouse, the other person's family, do they connect? Do they disengage? It's all this turmoil around it, because you have this split. And people and families get split along with it. Very few can stay connected. And then there's the job loss. Now, of course, it's not at the top of the list, but don't we draw our identity from what we do with our hands, with our minds, And then to lose a job, we gain a lot of identity from what we do. I can remember that in leaving the plumbing trade and going up to the North Shore, I can't tell you how many years, there are times, and sometimes I'm worried I'm going to still do it, that I'll pick up the phone and say, "Holds Apple Plumbing." Because I worked for that company 15 years. And it's so ingrained. I had so much of my identity was tied into that when I went to the next company, which was Franco Belli Plumbing, I sometimes picked up the phone, "Holds Apple Plumbing." And I think I did it once at home when I lived in Sound Beach. And the phone rang, and I picked it up. And I'm like, what am I saying, It's crazy. But it's ingrained, that identity. We find identity. So when people go through that change and stress of retiring or losing a job, it's just a shift in their lives. There is a change. There is an identity shift. And that has a way of ushering in all kinds of havoc in our hearts and our minds. Then, of course, last but not least, is the move, the relocation. Where you uproot and you leave a place. Maybe you leave family, but connections are broken. You've identified yourself in a certain surrounding. I can't tell you how long it took me to get used to living in Sound Beach. When I lived in Valley Stream, the dynamics of the neighborhood, the speed in which cars travel, congestion versus a lack of congestion, bumper to bumper versus the raceway. There was all this change, and it took a couple of years to get used to it. It's all part of our identities and where we connect ourselves. Well, it's in such times like this where we suffer loss and we suffer change and stress that God wants to enter into our confusion. Just as he did with Moses, because I believe God would like to give us all a type of burning bush experience where he gets our attention, where we actually can hear his voice and respond to it. And even if we have those hiccups where we're just not connecting fully with him, it begins a process where we begin to hear his voice and we get a sense of our identity, and there's in that confidence to go about our lives, to re-engage, because the change a lot of times causes us to disengage. We feel lost. We're confused. But God is there because he comes to us. And I want to say to you, whether you realize it or not, there isn't a day that the living God doesn't look for you. That he's not looking for you and wanting to spend time with you. And that's why I've said so often, and I will continue to say, it's important how you start your day. Taking moments to meet with him. Because that's where your true identity lies. Because he created you. He made you. And he has a plan for you. He has a purpose for your life. And even though you might be right now in flux, in between things, maybe in between a job, in between relationships, maybe you're having an identity crisis, God is there and he wants to say to you, I am. The great I am. I am your God. I have made you. I created you. Listen to these verses before we go. The first is from Jeremiah 29:11 from the Message. And I want to say to you before I read this, I want you to keep in mind this, that when Jeremiah speaks these words, he's speaking to a people that are like, they're gone, They're not living in obedience with God. But listen to what God speaks, hope and future for them. He tells them, in essence, I am with you, that this is not over. I know what I'm doing, God says. I know what I'm doing. I have it all planned out. Do you believe that this morning? Do you believe it for your life, that God knows what he's doing? But, Pastor Vin, you don't know what I'm dealing with right now. You don't know what I'm going through. But can you believe that God knows what he's doing in spite of what you're going through? I have it all planned out. Can you believe that? That regardless of what you're dealing with right now in your life, that God has a plan for you? Of course, we're not going to find it unless we're listening. Plans to take care of you. Not to abandon you. Plans to give you the future you hope for. Now, sometimes we hope for a future that is outside of his will, You ever wonder why sometimes God says no? Quite often it's because he loves us, and the very thing that we want, the very place that we want to go, is not exactly where he wants to take us. He knows it's not the best for us. But he has a hope and a future for each of us. As we remain connected with him and with each other. And that we hold on to who we truly are in Christ, with God, we can find it out. And listen to Isaiah 43:1 with me. But now, God's message, the God who made you in the first place, Jacob. And by the way, last week we sang about Israel. Sometimes we mention Jacob, and you say, but we're not Jews, we're not in Israel. No, but you and I represent those people now in this day and age. We are God's people. It's part of our identity. When we read the scriptures, we have been connected. We have been grafted in. We've become a part. We've been adopted into that heritage and into that family. This is God's message. The God who made you in the first place, Jacob, the one who got you started in Israel, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. I have redeemed you. That is, I have saved you. I have called your name. You're mine. You're mine. Now, wouldn't that be nice? You ever get up some days, you just don't know if you're coming or going, and you can hear God saying, I'm not done with you. I have a plan for you. And by the way, don't forget, you're mine. You're mine. I don't care how much you're struggling. When you fall, I'll pick you up. But you're mine. And I'm there for you. And I will not leave you, and I will not forsake you. See? In all that Moses went through, God had a plan. A plan for him to be adopted. A plan for him to be raised in that home. A plan to return back and to be used. God watched him. God made sure he would find his true identity. That in spite of all the other voices saying, man, how did you end up out here? You must have did something wrong. This is not what you were thinking, was it? And you can be sure it wasn't what Moses was thinking. When he struck that Egyptian, he was thinking something else other than having to flee and run away and be an outcast out in the wilderness. But in spite of that, God had a plan. God brought him back. God cleared things up. And I want to say to you today, before you go here, from this place, know that this is what God feels about you. This is what he feels about you. Regardless of what's going on inside you, inside your heart, inside your head, he has something in mind for you. And every day, he seeks to get your attention. Take the time to listen. Take the time to look. Oh God, how do you want to be? And I think sometimes we have to get to the point of desperation to turn to God. I know I do. I would say anything to you that I don't experience myself and live through it. But there are times I'm so desperate that there's no way I'm going to leave the house until I connect with Him. Because there's just a mess going on inside. Just pure chaos sometimes. You know? Because that's what life does to us. So Linda, that's why I don't always show up at the exact time every morning, okay? Because I can't leave until I have a sense and a semblance of Him in my life. That He's going to take hold of my day and He's going to do something good with it. Let's join our hearts. Father, I simply want to say that we are yours. Oh God, I pray, help us to be more aware of You than ever before. And help us to remember in our times of desperation who we are to turn to, where we can go for help. Lord, thank You for loving us. In Christ's name, amen. God bless you. Thank you.
Why don't you stand with me as we sing that opening song again. Hopefully the words will be on the screen. Did they ever make it up there?
Turn around.
I don't think so, but it's okay. We got it.
We will glorify the King of Kings. We will glorify the Lamb. We will glorify the Lord of Lords, who is the great I am. Lord Jehovah reigns in majesty. We will bow before His throne. We will worship Him in righteousness. We will worship Him alone. He is Lord of heaven and Lord of earth. He is Lord of all who live. He is Lord of all the universe. All praise to Him we give. Hallelujah to the King of Kings. Hallelujah to the Lamb. Hallelujah to the Lord of Lords, who is the great I am. We will glorify the King of Kings. We will glorify the Lamb. We will glorify the Lord of Lords, who is the great I am. Lord, we thank You for Your love for us, and we glorify You and Your name and Your Son and Your Spirit. And we pray, oh God, You'd have Your way in our lives.
Yes, God.
In Jesus' name. Amen. Have a great week.